If you like the Young Turks podcast, I think you'll love a lot of the podcasts on the TYT network. Old School, it's one of my favorites, one of the favorites for a lot of the listeners. Please check that out, subscribe, share it. That makes a big difference, and give it a 5-star rating. Thank you. All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Obviously, a somber day. We've had 2 mass shootings over the weekend. We're going to tell you more about them, give you details, and of course the president's reaction and how horrific it is on several different levels. We'll get to that a little bit later in the program. And then of course there's news beyond the shootings today as well, and some political news, including a new presidential candidate signing the pledge that I'm going to tell you about in a little bit, the Progressive Pledge. TYT.com/pledge to sign that and check it out. Obviously having a big impact. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Hassan Piker is going to join us in the second hour. I'll be debating him on capitalism versus socialism tomorrow in a news show. I'll tell you more about that later. But you can get all of our shows, of course, and support independent media that's going to do strong and aggressive reporting, including on these mass shootings, by going to TYT.com/join. All right, Anna, let's get started.
This shooter wrote that manifesto, and that this was inspired by his hatred of people here in this community.
That's Beto O'Rourke showing just how horrified he was, as many of us have been, over the mass shooting that took place in El Paso, Texas over the weekend. 20 people were killed and dozens more were injured as a result of this shooting. It took place at a shopping center in El Paso. The shooter then went into a Walmart and continued opening fire. Now, the authorities were able to apprehend the gunman, and he is currently in custody. He's a 21-year-old who had posted an anti-immigrant manifesto online right before he committed this act of domestic terror. Law enforcement authorities have delved into the background of 21-year-old Patrick Crusius, whom 2 officials identified as the suspect who opened fire in El Paso. At this point, everyone has identified him as the shooter. What may have motivated the attacker remains a focus of investigators who have examined a manifesto posted online that included screeds against immigrants. So the manifesto specifically referred to migrants, specifically Mexicans, taking over the state of Texas. He also referred to it as an invasion, something that we hear quite often from the likes of Donald Trump. He would refer to the migrant caravan as an invasion. And he also talked about how this was what he needed to do to essentially protect the country and protect the white race, which he was concerned was being taken over by Latinos crossing the border. Now, Sheriff Richard Wiles from El Paso said, quote, "The Anglo man came here to kill Hispanics. I'm outraged, and you should be too. This entire nation should be outraged. In this day and age, with all the serious issues we face, we are still confronted with people who will kill another for the sole reason of the color of their skin." And it shouldn't really be shocking or surprising. We already had a giant issue with gun violence in America. We already had a giant issue with mass shootings in America. And then when you combine that with the rhetoric that you hear from Donald Trump, this type of action shouldn't be surprising. And it should be a moment of self-reflection, especially for Trump and the right wing. And Cenk, before you jump in, I just want to show you compilation, just a few examples of what Donald Trump has said about immigrants.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. Illegal immigrants with criminal records, ordered deported from our country, are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
President Trump today tweeting, "Without any evidence, criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in."
Take your camera, go into the middle and search. You're gonna find MS-13, you're gonna find Middle Eastern, you're gonna find everything. This is an invasion. When you see these caravans starting out with 20,000 people, that's an invasion. I was badly criticized for using the word invasion. It's an invasion, and it's also an invasion of drugs, coming in from Mexico, okay?
So in the manifesto, it talked about a Hispanic invasion. And it said, send them back. And then it said that if the country falls, or it'll be because of the fault of the traitors. So all language that Donald Trump has used, if you can't see the connection, you're trying desperately not to see it. Either because you're a right winger who wants to protect the president under any circumstance, or you're the media and you like to do political correctness because you don't want to be yelled at by Republicans. So you go, well, it could be that or it could be this. No, it can't be anything. So now, if you want to say, well, does that mean Donald Trump is personally responsible for this? Well, that's an interesting conversation that's more theoretical. What degree of culpability does he hold? But was the guy encouraged by Donald Trump's rhetoric? It seems plainly obvious. He's saying the same exact things as Donald Trump, egged on, etc. Now, is that the only reason why this shooting happened? Of course not. There's a lot of people that are angry in a lot of different countries, right-wing, borderline fascists in places like Brazil, but they don't have as much access to weapons in other countries. Brazil's already bad enough with plenty of weapons and a lot of violence, but not nearly as bad as us because we have 300 million guns. So are the guns a huge part of it? Obviously. Look, anyone who says otherwise is either lying or a moron. You can't kill 22 people with a knife or a rope. It's super hard. So every once in a while there'll be a rampage with a car and somebody will be like, aha! There's one exception or two exceptions. No, the exception proves the rule. And then over 90% of the time, it's a gun and it causes mass damage that other weapons cannot cause because it's designed to kill people. And when you mix in the toxic stew of guns, which has been driving mass shootings for decades in America, in other countries that don't have them, there aren't mass shootings. It's a fact. I don't care how much the right wing cries about it. You know, they should be crying and worried about the actual people murdered. Instead, they turn around and they're like, oh, my beloved NRA. I have to go protect the NRA instead of protecting actual citizens while they pretend to be pro-life. No, you sold out the pro-life movement for the benefit of the NRA and so the gun manufacturers can make more money. So don't ever call yourself pro-life because whenever this happens, you make excuse after excuse after excuse for guns that are designed to kill people and a lot of people. And then you put in the white supremacy and the hatred and the demagoguery and it becomes obvious. Do you know that there's a study done that after Donald Trump gives a rally in a particular place, hate crimes go up by 226%. 226%. Guess where Donald Trump had a rally 6 months ago? El Paso, Texas.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Texas, last year in February, the Washington Post did a breakdown and analysis of campaign contributions given to Republican lawmakers. They're mostly Republican lawmakers by the NRA. And what they found was a huge bulk of those donations go toward lawmakers in the state of Texas. And so that's the reason why Republican lawmakers on one hand can protect the gun lobby and go against any and all common sense gun legislation, and at the same time argue that they're pro-life. Because they're doing what's convenient for them in any given situation for their own political career. They want the NRA money, so they have to protect the gun manufacturers. They got to ensure that more guns are sold. So their solutions usually include, let's arm more people, right? And then on the other hand, when they're confronted with evangelical voters, they pretend like they're pro-life. They don't stand for anything. They're literally spineless hypocrites. Well, not literally, but I mean, they have absolutely no courage, right? They have absolutely no real principles or values. They're driven by their own self-enrichment, their own political career. That's it. That's all that matters to them. They are not interested in representing the American people.
Look, then there's the Dayton shooting, which we're gonna get into later. But in that case, Senator Rob Portman from Ohio, how concerned he is, not that concerned, blocked any legislation on gun reform. Why? received $3 million in bribes from the NRA. Now, they're legalized bribes in our country. You could just give a politician $3 million and he's still fair and neutral. Oh no, that money doesn't affect him. Hilarious, ridiculous. Mitch McConnell's gotten over $1 million. Donald Trump's gotten $30 million. That's why after each one of these tragedies, he comes out and says, oh, we're gonna do something. We're gonna do something. And then he turns around a couple days later saying, just kidding, we're not gonna do anything. In fact, actually, we are gonna do something. We're gonna sell more guns by arming teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So they're never going to do anything about it because they're corrupt. And anyone who doesn't call these politicians corrupt is doing political correctness. Oh, I know Senator Portman or Senator McConnell, and I run into them in the cocktail circuit. And so I feel, a little uncomfortable calling them corrupt. Or Republicans will yell at me, Fox News will yell at me. Those are all excuses for why you lack courage, but they're not reality based. Everyone in the country, 96% of Americans know that the politicians serve their donors and not their voters. And so are they, you know what federal background checks poll at? 97%. We still haven't passed them.
Exactly. And even if you look at various recent polls on whether Americans want stricter gun regulations, 2 different polls. One of them is Reuters Ipsos, and they found that around 60% of Americans, this is polling both Democrats and Republicans, want stricter gun laws. So the narrative that you're hearing from these right-wing lawmakers is a false narrative. This assumption that no, Americans don't want gun control, this is a Second Amendment right. No, these are talking points that are fed to them by the NRA.
And let me be super clear. The House has already passed federal background checks. That's the easiest, most mild form of gun control. 60% of Americans say they want much more gun control.
Yes.
Okay, but 97% say at a bare minimum, we got to do a background check on people buying guns. To Democratic leadership's credit, which is rare, they already passed it back in February. So the Senate has blocked it, and Donald Trump says he would veto it. So if you are looking for who is politically responsible for these shootings, it is definitely the Republican Party, 100%. So they didn't pull the trigger. And there are a lot of different factors that go into why the shooting happened, as we just explained. But if you're looking for who's politically culpable, it is not 50-50. It is not even. Anyone who says it in the media is a liar and are cowards. The party responsible for the mass shootings and doing absolutely nothing about them politically is 100% the Republican Party. So if you like mass shootings, keep voting for Republicans. They literally say we will do absolutely nothing about them. And you know why the reason is? Everybody in the country knows it, except the media won't report it as such because, oh my God, it would offend people. It's because they take bribes. They take bribes from the NRA, which is run by the gun manufacturers.
I have to add one other thing. So since we're talking about Texas, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, had of course loosened some of the gun regulations in the state. And in announcing it, he decided to do this like press conference at a gun range. So he's at a gun range, he's shooting the target sheet. And then at one point, he essentially holds it up and says, I'm gonna carry this with me in case and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, I'm gonna carry this with me in case I come across any reporters. So not only do they serve as puppets for gun manufacturers, they also incite violence and glorify violence against individuals they simply don't like. In this case, journalists, which by the way, what does the First Amendment say? Right, the First Amendment, it comes before the Second Amendment, talks about freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But these authoritarian, zealots don't care about any of that. They don't. All they care about at the end of the day, they don't even really care about protecting guns. They care about protecting their political career, and that's it.
And today, Donald Trump did a tweet blaming the media for this. In other words, you should be really angry and go after the media. Well, you already encouraged the guys to go after immigrants. You already called the media the enemy of the state. So now your response to a mass shooting is to basically threaten violence against the media. So, I mean, if anyone is having an honest conversation about this is a no-brainer. There is one side constantly encouraging violence, hatred, fear, and demagoguery. It is the Republican Party. If you say otherwise, you're totally full of crap.
Well, there's more news in mass shootings.
wife Fran and I.
That's a crowd confronting Ohio's governor, Mike DeWine, arguing that he needs to do something about mass shootings. Another mass shooting happened in Dayton, Ohio over the weekend. It occurred less than 13 hours after a mass shooting happened in El Paso, Texas. 9 people were killed in Dayton, Ohio, and 27 others were injured, and this happened early Sunday morning. The gunman was also killed. The suspect was identified as a 24-year-old named Connor Betts. And he did not have any type of criminal record or police record. Betts used an assault-style rifle, a .22 caliber weapon with high-capacity magazines, and also wore body armor during the shooting. What I found fascinating about this story was the response by police and how the media just regurgitated what police said. Now, police took him down within 30 seconds. That's how it's been reported, and that's great, but he was still able to kill 9 people, including his own sister.
And this is where right-wing jackasses will step in and go, oh, guns don't kill people, people kill people. I bet he could have killed as many people with floss. No, the only way to kill that many people in that short a period of time is a weapon like a gun. And so you couldn't do it with even a weapon like a knife, etc. We've been over this 1,000 times. In Japan, they have the violent video games, which now Republicans are blaming for this. I mean, how pathetic. Every excuse you can go through. We rank #1 in gun violence because we have more guns than everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Not complicated.
So at the moment, I mean, there have been some theories about what his motive is. At the moment, nothing is really rooted in evidence. So the majority of the victims here were black. But there was no clear manifesto going along with this act of violence that someone can point to. But what we do know is that his classmates found him to be beyond unpleasant. He would threaten people. He had a kill list and a rape list. So the male classmates he wanted to murder were on the kill list, and the women, or the girls I should say, were on the rape list. So he was obviously a troubled kid, and it seems like some of the teachers and administrators knew about it as well. He had been punished as a result of keeping this list, but he carried out this horrible act of violence over the weekend, killing 9 people.
So look, in some cases, it's super clear as to the motive. There'll be a right winger with a manifesto or a Muslim extremist that has a clear record online of being an extremist. In this case, his sister was one of the first victims. So people don't know if it's about the sister, if it's about race, it's about politics. Some are saying he was left wing. But right now, police have said absolutely nothing about motivation. And it's clear that he had a record of being disturbed throughout. He got kicked out of the school for making the hit list of the women he wanted to rape. And it was apparently very, very graphic. The way that he was going to do it, etc. And so, but look, guys, the right wing guys are troubled too. And I don't know the particular motivation of this particular guy, but the Muslim extremists are also lunatics. So it's not, and every country has lunatics. Every race, every religion has lunatics. We're the only country that arms them. So that's the biggest difference of all.
That's exactly right. And one other thing I want to add about that. Of course, you can always expect after a mass shooting, you'll have a line of Republican lawmakers looking for any scapegoat so they don't have to talk about gun control. They don't want to upset their NRA campaign backers. But at the same time, I mean, how many years have we been dealing with mass shootings in America? If they genuinely think that the root cause of these mass shootings has to do with mental illness, what have they done to help fund mental health care in America?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Trump cut it.
Nothing.
So when Trump today talks about, mental health, well, then why did you cut funding for mental health? Priorities. I had to get a $2 trillion tax cut for the rich. That's the only thing he gave a damn about. He doesn't give a damn about mental health. He doesn't care about the mass shootings. He hasn't done anything about them. He doesn't even care about the issues that he stoked up his base about. And almost none of the wall is built. He didn't do anything but give $2 trillion in tax cuts to the rich. And sorry, they did pass one other important legislation to deregulate Wall Street. These politicians are such obvious crooks. It's so brazen. And this is why I get so frustrated at the mainstream media, because they'll play patty cakes. Oh, beloved politicians, it would be rude to call them out. No, they take bribes. They take bribes when somebody gives you. NRA gave Trump $30 million. Who doesn't think that's a bribe? Who in their right mind doesn't think that's a bribe?
Ben Shapiro.
Okay, it's an obvious legal bribe. You have to be a lunatic like Ben Shapiro to think it's not a bribe.
Right.
Oh, you give somebody $30 million and just say, hey, here, this is for you to benefit from, to get power from. You don't have to give it back. It's not anything like that. I'm just giving it to you, right? Oh, what? NRA did that for their health? For charity? No, it was to bribe Donald Trump, and it worked perfectly. You know what's the number one thing that Donald Trump responds to? Bribes.
100%.
And let's just say for a second that the guy is not only a left winger. This is a hypothetical, okay? Based on some information, he appears to be not a right winger, okay? And this is the hypothetical part, that he did it because he's a left winger, right? It's still the Republicans' fault. Go ahead, cry about it.
No, but it is.
And I'll tell you why.
We want gun control, right?
That's right. We would stop him dead in his tracks. We would take away those guns. We'd do background checks. And your interpretation of the Second Amendment is stupid. It says for a well-regulated militia. Can't you read? Are you stupid? Can you not read a sentence? For a well-regulated militia. Do these guys look well-regulated? Do they look like they're part of any organization? No, they're lone lunatics. Every one of them, no matter what their political affiliation is. And we would take their guns away. Go ahead and cry about that. But we would actually stop the massacres. We would stop the massacres. You wouldn't. If you're a right winger, you're like, hey, I like to have fun in the woods, and I like to blow things up, and I'm having fun. So hey, let them kill the kids. Let them kill the kids. So those are the actual diehard gun nuts that actually do vote that way. But the main problem isn't even the gun nuts, because they're actually a tiny percentage of the country. The much bigger problem is Republican politicians who say, I don't care if the gunman is a Muslim extremist, a right-wing extremist, left-wing extremist, I don't care. I am getting bribed by the NRA. I'm gonna let them all do the killings. I don't care about the politics, let them all murder people as long as I get my check from the NRA. They are blocking the legislation on the simplest regulation. It's not nearly enough, but federal background checks. Everyone agrees except the sons of bitches, Republicans in the Senate who are blocking it, allowing these massacres to happen over and over again. Is there no goddamn end to their greed? And by the way, if you're a left winger, we don't believe in violence. If you're a person who's in the left wing and you believe in violence, you're a moron who doesn't even understand your own ideology. The violence is for the right wing. They believe in authoritarian government, they believe in force and power, etc. We believe in democracy and rule of law. So get it through your head.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will give you Trump's reaction to the shootings and debunk everything that he says in his speech.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
back on the Young Turks. Now I want to share a lot of your comments because obviously a lot of you are also upset. Nicholas Ward writes in, for once I agree with Trump, this is a mental health issue. The shooter shares the same mental health issue as all Trump supporters. They take his rhetoric to heart. Yeah, well, I think that there is logic in that. Beckdo71 says, Moscow Mitch is now Massacre Mitch. We're gonna get to that in a minute. Ronan1 says, yeah, but we have licenses for cars, insurance, tests, registrations, etc. Anyone who says we should have a license for cars and insurance and all those other things, but not for guns, is a dishonest person. So that's obvious. But yet we have these nonsense debates. Kit Nicole 87, these are all members, says an active shooter could walk into the House or Senate and shoot members of the Senate and Congress, and the GOP still wouldn't do anything about mass shootings. Well, that's actually already proven to be true. Gabby Giffords was a United States Congresswoman. She was shot in the head. The rest of the Republicans, she's a Democrat. The Republicans in Congress were like, oh, don't care at all. Don't care, won't do anything, right? And then a left winger, one of the very, very rare ones, shot Steve Scalise, who's a Republican. And they were still like, nope, I still care more about my money than I care about whether Scalise is alive or dead or whether and other members of Congress gets shot in the head or not. There's no end to their depravity. Hell, now onto Twitter, and if you want to become a member, and tyt.com/join. Helen Stylanu says, all the world has mental health, video games, etc., but not mass shootings. It's your gun laws, stupid.
Boom.
100% right, Helen, thank you.
And Helen, we're gonna actually prove that in the context of video games later in the show.
That's right. And then last one, Just Me says, I've been so sad after the events of this weekend, but seeing Cenk so somber brings fresh tears to my eyes. Guys, we've been doing this for years. And even I did a live video over the weekend about El Paso, and I said there's going to be a shooting tomorrow. And there was a shooting tomorrow. And the very next day in Dayton, 13 hours later. Why? Because, as I've told you a million times, guns are everywhere. We let everybody in the country have a gun. And of course, a certain percentage of the country are maniacs. We're the only, but who's the real maniac? We're so stupid that we just keep saying, yeah, everybody have a gun. They're like candy. No, they're not candy. They dispense bullets. Okay, now let's go on to Trump.
May God bless the memory of those who perished in Toledo.
Yeah, it's not Toledo, jackass. If you're gonna go and give a press conference pretending to have empathy for the people who suffered in the shootings, it's El Paso, Texas. And by the way, Joe Biden also got this wrong. He thought it was Houston. And it's Dayton, Ohio, not Toledo, Ohio. Biden got that wrong too. He thought it was Michigan. If you want to care, and you want to at least pretend to care because you're a slimy politician, take 1 second to figure out where the shooting happened.
Yeah, it is strange that he mentioned Toledo because this was one of the speeches where he agreed to use a prompter, because everyone knows if he doesn't use a prompter, he's gonna say things that are entirely inappropriate off the cuff. So let's go to graphic 9 real quick. So there's the giant prompter right in front of him. It doesn't mention Toledo, it just says Texas and Ohio. So I don't know where he got Toledo from.
No, because the minute he goes off that prompter, and then there were some terrible things that he said we're gonna get to in a second, but there was some good language against white supremacy for the first time ever, right? And you could read the sentences, we'll show them to you. There's no way he wrote those. Of course, they had to put it on a prompter so that he would actually say them. But the minute he goes off the prompter, he's like, oh, like in Toledo. God, no, stick with the prompter, idiot. So, and that prompter was gigantic, and he still can't get it right. And they had to put out the White House transcript, and in the official transcript, they crossed out in Toledo, because it's not in Toledo and the president's an idiot.
Exactly. So let's go through all the different things Trump mentioned in his response speech, starting with, to his credit, condemning white supremacy.
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy.
So that's a fine statement, except I don't believe him, because I have no doubt that either tomorrow or a few days from now, he'll fall back on the one campaign strategy that has gotten him in the position that he's in today, which is stoking racial tensions, exploiting racial divisions in the country, and saying the most hideous things about immigrants. By the way, again, over 24 migrants have died in US custody at the border. So we're in the business of killing people in America. So let's quickly go to graphic one, because in the middle of this image, you will see the text from the manifesto that the shooter had posted online right before he committed this act of domestic terror. And on both sides, you'll see tweets from Donald Trump that reference specific words that were also used in the manifesto. So words like immigrant invasion, takeover, those types of things were included in this killer's manifesto, showing that, yeah, white supremacy is a problem in the country, but the fish rots from the head down. Donald Trump has been using racist rhetoric in order to prop himself up in his campaigns and in his presidency.
So let me just talk about the prompter for one more second. Guys, look, slipping up about the city is the least of his problems. But when you see him read from the prompter, it's so obvious. Now, look, do other presidents read from prompters? Absolutely, right? Do they usually check their speeches and edit them? Yes. Does Trump? God knows, right?
No, he doesn't.
And he comes across as incredibly disingenuous when he reads the prompter. When he's the real Donald Trump, you know it. Oh, we had a very strong reaction, etc. Right? When he's reading from a prompter, he reads like this. So he said these words. These are good words. He said, these sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hate warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. Does anyone believe Donald Trump wrote that?
Of course not. And you want to know why no one believes he wrote that? Because this is what the real Donald Trump looks like.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
That was his response after the hate march in Charlottesville, Virginia, which led to the murder of Heather Heyer by white supremacists.
Look, over 24 terrorists, right-wing terrorists that either carried out the attack or planned an attack have cited Donald Trump specifically, let alone the others that were encouraged by him and had similar language. But about 24 have literally said, oh, I really like Donald Trump. I was inspired by the message of Donald Trump, etc. One of the very first ones that happened was not a shooting. It was a couple of guys who beat down a homeless person.
And urinated on him.
And yes, and urinated on him in public because he was a Latino. Now, of course, he was a US citizen, who cares? That's a brown person, let's go, and he's homeless, he can't help him defend himself, anything, right? Pick on the most powerless person based on race and do that kind of horrific attack, right? You know what Donald Trump said afterwards? He said, well, I have very passionate followers and they love this country very much. In response to that attack. Because not only does he encourage people with his overall rhetoric, but he specifically backs guys who do specific acts of violence based on that rhetoric. Remember all the rallies where he said, oh, start beating people up like the good old days and I'll pay your legal bills. He has encouraged violence from day one. He's not at all put off by it. He thinks there's very fine people on that side.
So with that said, and we're gonna get to him glorifying violence in just a second, but there was a curious call for bipartisanship during his speech as well.
Open wounds cannot heal if we are divided. We must seek real bipartisan solutions. We have to do that in a bipartisan manner.
So lack of bipartisanship isn't an issue coming from the Democrats in this case, right? Democrats in the House, by the way, have already passed gun control legislation. You wanna know where it's stalled? Where there's a big bottleneck? It's with Massacre Mitch in the Senate. He has blocked legislation. He won't even bring it to the floor for a vote. So you want to talk about bipartisanship, take a good hard look at your own house, okay?
And ironically, Trump tweeted about how, oh yeah, we can do this as long as we attach it to the kind of anti-immigration, quote unquote, reform that I want. The guy in El Paso shot people because he thought there was an immigrant invasion. And your answer is to double down on that as a solution to the shootings? What kind of a monster does that? That's the real Donald Trump, not the one going, I would like to do bipartisan solutions. What are you okay, check. The House already passed federal background checks. You're blocking it. You said you'd veto it. So why don't you do the bipartisan thing that you claim? What an unbelievable liar.
And let's take a quick look at where the American people stand, where the voters stand, and how the Republican Party incessantly turns its back on these voters. So according to Quinnipiac, universal background checks, 94% of Americans support it. Mandatory waiting periods to buy a gun so you can do a proper background check. 83% of Americans support that. Gun license requirement, 77% of Americans support that. The vast majority of Americans, including Republicans, do support common sense gun legislation. But Mitch McConnell will not bring that legislation to the floor for a vote, and there's a specific reason why. Again, he's accepting money from the NRA, so he has to act as the NRA's puppet. For him, that cold hard cash is way more important than saving people's lives. So with that said, let's get back to violence, because Trump thinks that glorifying violence, according to what he said in his speech, is a very, very bad thing. Take a look.
We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence.
Okay, so with that said, let's take a look at a video of Trump glorifying violence.
But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no. That's only in the panhandle you can get away with that statement. Knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise. I have plans on Afghanistan that if I wanted to win that war, Afghanistan would be wiped off the face of the earth. It would be gone. It would be over literally in 10 days.
He has been glorifying violence from the moment he started campaigning for president.
Yeah, in the Panhandle speech, when he was talking about what do you do with this problem, he was specifically talking about immigrants. And the guy says, shoot them. And he laughs about it, like, only in the Panhandle. No, it turns out not only in the Panhandle, also in El Paso, Texas.
And when he jokes about it, you can hear someone in the background say, Second Amendment. That's what the Second Amendment's for, right?
Oh, by the way.
Innocent people who are fleeing for safety.
Yeah,
amazing.
And I'm glad you reminded me of that. And no one's talking about it today. I didn't see in any of the articles or any of the coverage. Remember when during the campaign, he started talking about a Second Amendment remedy for Hillary Clinton. Wow. I mean, we got past like all of these insane calls to violence over and over and over again. And now we're having a fake debate as to whether Donald Trump incited this kind of white nationalism, demagoguery, and violence? Of course he did. Is he solely responsible? No. Is he partly responsible? Obviously. It's like the fascists in Germany going, oh, people got riled up against the Jews. I don't know where that came from. Oh, well, we looked around. We were looking for bipartisan solutions, couldn't come up with any. Yeah, I know where it came from. Are there Democrats going around saying, oh, the Mexicans are criminals and rapists? No, there aren't anybody saying that. Are there Democrats, and I got a whole heap of problems with corporate Democrats, okay? But are any of them, even those guys, are any of them going around calling, goddamn Hispanic invasion? Is this somebody gonna do anything about it? The answer is no. There is one racist party in America. It is definitely the Republican Party. And that's why, by the way, we talk about blaming Trump. I also blame the voters, the Republican voters, because the Republican voters had a choice of 17 people and they're like, the most racist one, that one. We definitely want him. So, don't like we get to complain about mass shootings. You Republican voters, this is what you aided and abetted. You don't get to complain about it.
Yeah, and look, I have to show you because Trump isn't the only one. You're right, it is the voters, and Trump has emboldened people to carry out acts of violence, or in the very least, really show people who they really are. So let's take a look at Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's done how many segments now where he goes after immigrants? In this one particular segment, he had a lower third titled, "How exactly is diversity our strength?" So what is it, our weakness?
Of course, that's what they think.
Of course.
Because you're watering down the white race in America, and that's an obvious weakness. In reality, I could answer him for hours on how diversity is our strength. But he doesn't want to have that intellectual conversation. He just wants to say diversity is the problem, isn't it? And implicit in all of their talk isn't someone going to do anything about it. And hey, Tucker and Trump, congratulations, somebody did something about it.
And finally, Representative Steve King, how can we forget? When he was interviewed by the New York Times, he said, quote, white nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? Why did I sit in classes teaching me about the merits of our history and our civilization?
By the way, coincidentally, J.D. Scholten announced his candidacy today against Steve King. He nearly beat him last time. If you don't like white nationalists being encouraged by politicians to do massacres, you should throw Steve King's ass out of Congress. He's a United States congressman. That is an unbelievable shame for the rest of the country, let alone that district. You have a wonderful alternative. Go look up J.D. Scholten and make sure you support him to remove monsters like Steve King from Congress. And it's not just the white nationalism. Steve King, along with all of his Republican buddies, takes money from the NRA and purposely blocks legislation that would prevent these, at least have a shot at preventing these mass shootings. Why? Oh, Steve King takes money from the NRA. Get his ass out of Congress.
We got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will do a deep dive into the argument that Republicans are using, indicating that video games are to blame. We're gonna debunk that. And then we're gonna tell you the story behind Massacre Mitch.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Let me go to the member section first. George the Animal Steel writes in, obviously an homage. Someday, Cenk, I would very much like to say how wrong you are about mass shootings occurring nearly every day. However, your video on Sunday describing the carnage in El Paso, and more importantly, your rock-solid prediction that it would happen again and again and again, made me extremely sad, knowing that you didn't know about the massacre in Dayton at the time of the recording. The day I can say you were wrong, Cenk, will be the happiest day of my life. Unfortunately, I cannot see that anytime soon. That is true. You saw it on Sunday. I recorded it on Saturday night after the El Paso shooting, and obviously a couple hours after I recorded that video, the Dayton shooting happened. And so that leads me to I Sanchez on Twitter, writing in, I saw the towers fall in New York with my own eyes. I've been racially harassed by police via stop and frisk many times. Had my car vandalized with racial profanity written on my car, 2 bad car accidents. But the shootings this past weekend made me more scared than anything. And look, I'm an optimist. Anybody who watches this show knows that. But on the massacres, there is no room for optimism.
No, zero.
Until you get money out of politics and end the private financing of elections, which almost no politician has a real plan for, including our own, including the progressives. Their plans for getting an amendment to end private financing is near zilch. And I don't know what their plan is. Do you know what Bernie Sanders' plan is for an amendment, or Elizabeth Warren's? I'm keeping it real. And so they're not gonna end the private financing. And so I don't know how they're gonna get anything done. And they're certainly not gonna be able to stop this. And so the Republicans will keep on blocking it because they keep on taking bribes. And so if you're scared, it is super legitimate. I told somebody the other day, they asked me, hey, is it safe to go to Turkey? I said, are you mental? is it safe to stay here in America? Literally, you'll be safer going to Turkey. Even with the very few terrorism things that happened in Turkey a couple of years ago, even if you went in the middle of that, you'd be way safer over there than you would be over here. Because a random mass shooting can and will happen in your neighborhood. Yep. So you can be shocked and chagrined all you like until you do something about it, and that is ending the private financing of elections. It's gonna happen forever. Look, I don't know. Am I the smart guy? What's wrong with people? What's wrong with politicians? Why can't they think 2 steps ahead? How do you fix any of these problems? And the private financing of elections. Otherwise, all politicians will be forever bribed. And that's not a genius thing to say, right? Isn't that so easy? Isn't that obvious? Yet none of the politicians have any goddamn plan to do it. It's maddening. All right, look, I'll give credit now to a good guy this weekend who did something right and talked about this issue. So Mayor Bill de Blasio was in LA. I met with him and he very enthusiastically signed the Progressive Pledge. We want you guys to do likewise, tyt.com/pledge. The more people who sign it, the more power it has. Bill de Blasio is clearly in the progressive wing of the party. We talked about that in my interview with him, which you should check out on YouTube. If we'll put this up and you could, we'll put up the link to it if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook. He went one by one and explained, look, this is the bare minimum for progressives. Whether it's higher wages, ending the corruption in politics, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, college for all. He's like, where's the question? And so if a politician or someone running for president thinks that this is some sort of big demand in terms of a litmus test, that's okay. That means they're not a progressive. And so they could be a moderate, they could be a centrist, they can call themselves whatever they like. You don't have to call them something derisive like I do, which I think they earn, like conservative, corporate, establishment, etc. But they are definitely not progressive. So we now have the progressive wing. You can go to tyt.com/signed to see who signed it. Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Jamie Raskin, Ro Khanna, Just Democrats, Sunrise Movement, and PCCC, Roots Action, etc. So I love that he did that, but also listen to his words about gun violence. Look, first of all, on campaign finance reform, New York has an 8-to-1 matching. At least public financing gets better. So that's terrific. Hear him out on that. And on gun violence, New York tries to at least prevent it. And he has a very strong record on that, as do all the progressives. Speaking out, Sanders and Warren today, very, very forcefully on this issue, saying it is Donald Trump's fault and it is the Republican Party's fault, and we're gonna do something about it. But I like that we have another very strong progressive running for president that signed the Progressive Pledge. You sign it to make it that much stronger every day. All right, let's move on to the other side of the equation, which is horrific.
As Republicans stumble upon one another trying to figure out which scapegoat they're gonna use to deflect from the issue of guns in America, the topic of video games has come up. This happens time to time, and here is the insanely ignorant argument that we keep hearing from these lawmakers.
But the idea of these video games to dehumanize individuals, to have a game of shooting individuals and others, I've always felt that is a problem for future generations and others.
This manifesto, he talks about living out his super soldier fantasy on Call of Duty. And I say, how long are we going to let, for example, and ignore at the federal level particularly, where they can do something about the video game industry?
And we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence.
Just want to note that the Trump property in Doral has an arcade with first shooter video games. Just putting that out there. First person shooter. I'm an underground gamer. I don't know if you know that, but
okay, I don't know that based on that. So look, in all seriousness, as always, Trump hypocritical on every single issue. Those same properties were filled with undocumented immigrants that were workers.
Yes.
And it was so embarrassing 2.5 years into his administration when he got caught. He's like, oh, okay, I will now fire them, even though I was paying them less wages. and now I have to pay American workers more wages. God damn it, right? Hypocrite through and through on every single issue.
So let's get back to video games and whether or not they contribute to mass shootings or whether they're the catalyst for mass shootings in America. Now, America isn't unique. There are many other countries that have high sales of video games, but no other country has the problem that we have because we're swimming in guns. Now, let's say we were to give the right wing the benefit of the doubt, and it turns out that what they're saying is true. I'm gonna show you what a chart would look like if video games were even correlated to mass shootings in America. If you look at this chart, you'll see, first of all, America right there in the middle, at the very top, United States. That indicates, how far ahead we are in the number of mass shootings compared to all those other countries, including many European countries who also have high sales of video games, right? So here's what the chart actually looks like. Yeah, so there is no correlation between video game spending per capita and gun-related murders in America, right? Or in any of these countries.
Everyone under the age of 35 knows this. I don't care how right-wing you are, you know this.
Yeah.
You know that in Japan, they have just as many violent video games as us, and they have no mass shootings at all. We have a mass shooting every single day. Really, does it take a rocket scientist to figure out, even if you didn't see that data collected from all those different countries, to know that it ain't the video games? Everybody knows that, except these slimy Republican politicians. Even they know that, but they're like, yeah, but it's kind of inconvenient because I get bribed by the NRA every single year.
Yeah,
so I have to have put a boogeyman on it.
Yeah.
So the boogeyman I'm gonna pick is video games. Really, I'm serious, MAGA guys, right-wing guys, if you're watching this video, are any of you stupid enough to think that it's the video games?
No one
I don't think even you guys are that stupid.
I know, but look, more importantly, okay, so let's say Republicans say, okay, it's the video games, and then they somehow regulate video games or they ban violent video games. Where does it end? What else are they gonna ban? Are they gonna ban TV shows? Are they gonna ban, movies? Are they gonna ban anything that has any type of depiction of violence? Are they gonna ban Donald Trump? Are they gonna ban, I don't know, the Pentagon? Are they gonna ban war hawks like Lindsey Graham, who salivates at the thought of doing a nuclear attack on North Korea? Are they gonna get rid of all these things, all these people? Come on. By the way, so let me give you this report from the Washington Post. This was back in 2012, because as you can imagine, this comes up over and over again because mass shootings happen in America over and over again. It's true that Americans spend billions of dollars on video games every year, and that the United States has the highest firearm murder rate in the developed world. But other countries where video games are popular have much lower firearm-related murder rates. In fact, countries where video game consumption is highest tend to be some of the safest in the world, likely a product of the fact that developed or rich countries where consumers can afford expensive games have on average much less violent crime.
Except America.
Except America, because we're swimming in guns. And also, look, I think that there are so many factors, right? But regardless of how many societal ills you're dealing with, what kills people is the easy access to these guns, or easy access to weapons that have high capacity magazines, which is why in Dayton, Ohio, the cops can stop the shooter within 30 seconds, but the shooter has already killed 9 people and injured dozens more.
Yeah, so look guys, we're intellectually honest. So we thought it was stupid when the Democrats had this issue, and they did. Back in 1994, Joe Lieberman started talking about this. Is that surprising? Has Joe Lieberman ever been right on a single issue? Okay, so that's Lieberman. And then guess who got into the act in the early 2000s? Hillary Clinton. And she talked about how video games were violent and leading to violence, totally wrong. And then the last Democratic politician to do a big push against video games was Joe Biden. Okay, we're not making this stuff up. It is history. Those are the 3 leading Democrats that were against video games. And we don't agree with the Republicans. We agree more with, we're progressives. And we're happy to call those guys out. They were all totally wrong. And by the way, studies have been done since those different congressional hearings, et cetera. And every one of them, even not comparing us to other countries within America, says it does not lead to violence. Every single study shows it does not lead to violence. So the Democrats finally stopped saying it. The last guy standing was Joe Biden with that position. I don't know if he still has it because he likes to keep positions for 40 years that don't make any sense. Okay, but the Republicans have now all flipped. They're like, oh, I need something. I can't. We just not guns. So bunnies, kittens, rainbows, video games. Screw it. Let's go with video games. It doesn't matter. Nothing we say is based on fact anyway, right? So Republican voters out there, Republican supporters out there, are you willing to be intellectually honest and say, yes, the politicians you just saw are obvious jackasses and they're lying on purpose? Are you willing to say that? 9 out of 10 times, no, my side. No, I don't care about facts. My side. Ugh.
So let's move on to Massacre Mitch.
Mitch McConnell needs to get off his ass and do something. People are getting killed in the streets in America and nobody's acting, nobody.
Representative Tim Ryan from Ohio is outraged, as many of us are, over Mitch McConnell's efforts in blocking any type of gun control legislation in the Senate. So there have been various examples of bills that have passed in the House, and as soon as it gets to the Senate, McConnell blocks it. He did something very similar when it came to protecting our elections from Russian meddling or foreign meddling. Now, just to give you a few examples, a ban on assault weapons was introduced back in January, but has not been voted on either in the House or the Senate. A prior ban, which was enacted in 1994, expired in 2004. So the House recently passed a background check bill, and it went to the Senate, and Mitch McConnell did what Mitch McConnell does. He blocked it, didn't go to the floor for a vote. Now, I want to hear a little more from Tim Ryan, because his interview was actually excellent, and it's about time people call Massacre Mitch by his real name.
That's a joke. That's an absolute freaking joke that he's going to tie this to the most polarizing issue happening in the United States today around immigration reform. This is very clear cut here. There are people that are getting access to guns that shouldn't be, and the guns are high powered. The magazines hold too many bullets, and they're coming to places like Dayton and El Paso, Walmart's, entertainment districts, churches like Mother Emanuel AME in South Carolina, and they're killing American citizens. Mitch McConnell needs to get off his ass and do something. People are getting killed in the streets in America and nobody's acting, nobody. There's a bottleneck in the United States Senate. The House has sent a comprehensive background check bill that's supported by 80 to 90% of the American people. What the hell are we doing in the United States of America? I'm telling you, people are fed up. We were here in Dayton last night. There were tears and there was rage.
And there should be rage. The shooter managed to kill 9 people in 30 seconds. The cops stopped him within 30 seconds, but he still managed to kill 9 people because of the type of weapon he had. He had an assault weapon, and he's able to do damage very quickly.
So there's a lot of things that divide the Democrats. Gun control is not one of them. And Nancy Pelosi deserves credit too. Immediately when they took charge, they passed 2 pieces of legislation which are completely uncontroversial, one is supported by 94% of Americans, the other is supported by 88% of Americans. What else do you need? Overwhelming majorities of Republicans support them. So what are they? One is federal background checks. So right now you have to do a background check if you buy it in a store, but if you don't buy it in a store, well, who cares? You just go into a gun show, there's a giant loophole, you buy it anywhere you like in that sense. And so people are like, close the loophole, close the goddamn loophole, okay? Everyone agrees except the Republican Party. In the Senate, blocked it, won't allow for a vote because they don't want to be embarrassed voting in favor of massacres. So Mitch McConnell just says, no, let the massacres happen and we just don't vote on it. And I mean, why are you opposed to the great majority of Republican voters on this issue? If you're not being bribed by the NRA, because you say it's not bribes, it's just campaign contributions for charity and because they care about the American people. If it's not a bribe, why don't you vote with your own voters, let alone 94% of the country? Nope, he blocks it.
He blocks it, but I have to add one thing. He keeps getting reelected. So he keeps turning his back on his very constituents, his voters and what they want, and they keep voting him back into office. So he's a reflection of us. All of these lawmakers are a reflection of us, Jake.
Yeah, no, that one I actually disagree with it slightly. It's a quick aside. Look, Trump is a reflection of the Republican Party. They had a lot of choices and they chose the most reprehensible one. Mitch McConnell and a lot of the Republicans trick their voters with money. What does the money do? They get the money from the NRA and then they run ads. They overwhelm sometimes Democrats in their races with ads. You know what Mitch McConnell ran on to win election last time? He pretended to be in favor of Kentucky's version of Obamacare. The same legislation he tried to kill dozens of times. Mitch McConnell is a gigantic liar, but he had enough sense to pretend to be a progressive so he could win an election. But how did he trick people? Because he has money in politics. He has all that money. Number two, they run against soft-ass Democrats time and time again. Chuck Schumer, the idiot, could not pick a candidate if his life depended on it. Every time he's like, who's the softest? Who's the weakest? Who agrees with the Republicans the most? Let's go with that one, right? So that's partly why Mitch McConnell wins elections. And the last one is the mainstream media. Oh, I don't know, is it a bribe? I can't tell. So the NRA has given at least $1.26 million to Mitch McConnell. No real American believes that that's anything but a bribe. We understand that the Supreme Court legalized bribes in this country. Now you can give millions of dollars to politicians, but that's an obvious bribe. But the media won't say it. They won't say it. They won't say it. They have to protect their beloved goddamn Mitch McConnell because he's part of the establishment and they're in the same goddamn club. Say it. It's a goddamn bribe. So Trump got $30 million from the NRA, and we have a list of Republicans who've gotten millions upon millions of dollars to sell you out and block this legislation, which brings me back to the second legislation the House passed. They said, look, it's a 3-day waiting period. One of the biggest massacres in the country happened because the guy was allowed to get a gun because they couldn't do the background check in 3 days. So they just want to extend it to 10 days. They do the background check, then you get your gun, okay? It's actually tiny reform. It's actually not gonna fix much at all. It's very politically safe. That's why 88% of Americans are in favor of it. Mitch McConnell blocked it. Yeah. No waiting period. Sell more weapons, NRA, where's my check? You know how much the NRA gave the Republican Party in the 2016 election cycle? $50 million. No one in the country thinks it's anything but a bribe.
So Congress is on vacation right now. The month of August is when they take their recess. I feel like they're on recess all the time. But anyway, lawmakers are calling on Mitch McConnell to call for an emergency meeting so they can vote on this legislation. McConnell responded by saying that he fell and fractured his shoulder, and he's working from home.
Or not working from home.
That's exactly right.
What are you doing from home? Oh, I'm blocking legislation from over here. Right. Oh, okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know. My husband literally had shoulder surgery last year. It didn't stop him from walking, didn't stop him from traveling. It didn't stop him from doing the right thing.
By the way, is that your excuse, Mitch? Hey, I had a little problem with my shoulder, so that's why I'm allowing the massacres to happen. Well, then you would earn your nickname of Massacre Mitch. I'm sorry, are we bothering you? Is that what's happening? Did El Paso and Dayton, all those people getting murdered, was that bothering you? Okay, here, I'm gonna read a quick list from Public Citizen of Republicans. This is not anywhere near exhaustive. This is just the biggest people who've been bribed by the NRA. Senator Burr from North Carolina, $6.9 million the NRA gave him. Senator Blunt, 4.5 million. Senator Tillis, 4.4 million. Senator Gardner from Colorado, $3.8 million worth of legalized bribes from the NRA. Senator Marco Rubio, who curiously doesn't want to do anything about these mass shootings, even though they happen in his home state over and over again. Hey, look at that, $3.3 million. I'm sure that's not at all connected to his intransigence on this issue. Senator Ernst from Iowa, 3.1 million. Senator Portman from Ohio, blocking the legislation along with Massacre Mitch, pretending to care about the shooting in Ohio, doesn't give a damn. What does he give a damn about the $3 million he got in bribes from the NRA? Senator Young, 2.8 million, Senator Cassidy, 2.8 million, and the list goes on and on. So finally, I just wanna say, I'm mad at the rest of the media because they won't call it what it is. If you actually called it a bribe, which is what it is, people might get more upset about it, and they might realize, hey, especially if on cable news or the New York Times, by the way, Washington Post, you put up a list of the people being bribed and how much they got bribed by industry, then maybe the voters could have enough information to make informed decisions.
I know, but what would their advertisers think, and what would those politicians think? Would those politicians come back on their shows?
Who gives a damn? Do you know that these politicians are so unpopular? Why do you want them on your show? They're a scourge upon the nation. Who cares if you have a boring ass politician who's gonna lie to you on the show anyway? That's what you're selling out the American people for? That's what you're doing political correctness for? But finally, look, guys, I'm mad at the Democratic candidates and even the most progressive ones. Call it what it is. It's the corruption, stupid. Like Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. It's the corruption, stupid, on every issue, on the environment, on Medicare for all, and on guns. And call it what it is. Your goddamn colleagues take bribes. That's what they do. Call it out. Would you like to win? If you want to win, you know what? Even all the independents and even some of the Republicans might be like, oh my God, I can't believe there's actually an honest politician in the country, and they might be on your side. But no, still, even the most progressive ones, yes, Elizabeth Warren said corruption a couple of times. But overall, oh my God, my colleagues, your colleagues are getting us killed. Call it what it is.
I gotta make one more point. So immediately following the mass shooting that took place in El Paso, Texas, Mitch McConnell tweeted an image featuring tombstones. And each tombstone mentions a political issue that's tied to the left, like socialism, whatever. I mean, and his opponent's name, by the way. His opponent is Amy McGrath.
He's gonna have plenty more opponents. She's picked by Chuck Schumer. Okay, Anna, I'm so glad you brought that up. You know the nickname that Massacre Mitch gave himself recently? This wasn't a nickname on Twitter, and it wasn't by the Democrats. He gave it to himself, the Grim Reaper. Wow, no political nickname has ever been more accurate.
We got to take a break. When we come back, Hassan Piker will be joining us, and we're going to give you an update on one of the Trump terrorists and what the consequences will be for his acts of terror.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.